Alex thought he had the perfect marriage, until he caught his wife, Jenna, cheating with another man. Heartbroken and humiliated, he sets out on a calculated path of revenge, dismantling her career, her finances, and her reputation piece by piece. But as Jenna's life spirals out of control, Alex begins to question whether victory is worth the cost. When his quest for justice leads to an unexpected and devastating tragedy, Alex is forced to confront the consequences of his actions and the emptiness that revenge has left behind. This is a haunting tale of betrayal, vengeance, and the tragic price of going too far. My name is Alex, and 10 years ago, I thought I had it all. Jenna and I met during our sophomore year of college. I still remember the first time I saw her, sitting in the front row of a business lecture, tapping her pen against the desk like she had better things to do. She was radiant. The kind of woman you'd see in a movie and think, people like her don't exist in real life. But there she was. Smart, funny, beautiful, and absolutely out of my league. I don't know why she chose me. Maybe it was my persistence, or the way I made her laugh when I stumbled through asking her out for coffee. Whatever the reason, we became inseparable. By the time we graduated, we were talking about marriage. Everyone told me we were too young, that we should wait until we'd lived a little. But I was head over heels, and Jenna. She convinced me that we were different. When you know, she'd say with that infectious smile of hers. We got married in a small ceremony 6 months after graduation. I was just starting out at an IT firm, working ridiculous hours to climb the ladder. Jenna, on the other hand, had big dreams. She wanted to be a fashion designer, and I was determined to help her get there. For years, our life was a grind, but it was our grind. I poured everything into supporting her. When she wanted to start her own fashion line, I drained my savings to make it happen. I took on extra projects at work to make sure she had what she needed. I was her biggest fan, her safety net, her partner in every sense of the word. Or so I thought. It started with little things. Jenna became distant, distracted. She'd spend hours on her phone, texting or scrolling, barely looking up when I tried to talk to her. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Her business was taking off, and I figured the pressure was getting to her. But then there were the nights she came home late, claiming she'd been at networking events or client meetings. She'd never been much of a drinker before, but now she'd stumble through the door smelling like wine, her cheeks flushed, her hair a mess. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Is everything okay? I asked one night as we sat at the dinner table. She was picking at her food, barely eating. What do you mean, she said, not looking up. You just seem distracted. Is it work? She sighed, finally meeting my eyes. It's nothing, Alex. Just a lot on my plate right now. I wanted to press her, but I didn't. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. And then came that night. It was a Friday, and I just landed the biggest client of my career. I was over the moon, practically bouncing as I drove home. I stopped by Jenna's favorite bakery to pick up her favorite chocolate mousse cake. I wanted to surprise her, to celebrate with the woman I loved. But when I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. Jenna's car was there, but the house was dark. Normally, she'd leave a light on for me, especially if she knew I'd be late. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe she'd gone to bed early. As I walked through the front door, I heard it. Laughter. A man's laughter. For a split second, I froze. My mind raced with excuses. Maybe she had friends over. Maybe it was the TV. But deep down, I knew. I climbed the stairs slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The laughter grew louder, mingled with Jenna's voice. She sounded happy, carefree, like the woman I'd fallen in love with. But that laugh wasn't for me. When I reached our bedroom, the door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and there they were. Jenna and some guy I didn't recognize, tangled up in the sheets of our bed. My vision blurred. My mind went blank. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand answers. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring, while Jenna scrambled to cover herself. "Alex," she gasped, her face pale. The guy bolted, grabbing his pants and shoes as he disappeared down the hallway. I looked at Jenna, waiting for her to say something, anything, that would make this make sense. Instead, she glared at me, her voice sharp and defensive. "Maybe if you weren't always working, I wouldn't have to find attention elsewhere." Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. This wasn't an apology. This wasn't regret. It was blame. As if I was the reason she'd decided to betray me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My hands were shaking, my throat dry. I turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, and into the cold night air. For hours, I drove aimlessly, the sound of her voice echoing in my head. How could she do this to me? After everything I'd done for her, everything I'd sacrificed. By the time I returned home, the sun was rising. Jenna was asleep, or at least pretending to be. I didn't bother waking her. I didn't want to see her face. But as I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, something shifted inside me. The pain was still there, raw and overwhelming, but beneath it was something darker. Anger. If Jenna thought she could humiliate me, destroy everything we'd built, and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. Dead wrong. I didn't leave Jenna right away. No, that would have been too easy for her. She didn't deserve a clean break, a chance to rebuild her life on her terms. Not after what she did. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd show her just how ugly things could get. For the next few days, I played the role of the perfect husband. I made coffee in the mornings, kissed her cheek before work, and even asked about her day like nothing had happened. It was torture, pretending everything was fine while I seethed inside, but it was necessary. If I wanted my revenge, I couldn't tip her off. And Jenna? She didn't suspect a thing. She thought I'd accepted her lame excuse, that I'd let her manipulate me into thinking her betrayal was somehow my fault. I could see it in her smug little smile, the way she acted like she'd won. But she had no idea what I was planning. The first step was to gather evidence. I needed something solid, proof that she wasn't just unfaithful, but reckless and irresponsible, too. Something I could use against her in court if it came to that. That's when I hired a private investigator. His name was Mike, a gruff ex-cop who didn't ask too many questions. "You want me to follow her, see who she's meeting?" he asked during our first meeting. "Exactly," I said. "And I need every detail, texts, photos, dates, locations. Whatever you can find." Mike nodded, sliding his notebook into his pocket. "Give me a week." While Mike worked in the shadows, I focused on Jenna's business. From the very beginning, I'd been the one funding her dream. I'd co-signed every loan, paid every invoice, and negotiated most of her contracts. On paper, it might have looked like her business, but in reality, it was ours, and she'd forgotten that. I didn't. I started by reaching out to her suppliers, the ones I had connections with. I told them we'd be renegotiating terms. Some of them were hesitant, but I made it clear that if they didn't play ball, there'd be no more business. Jenna didn't even notice. She was too busy playing the role of the independent entrepreneur, bragging to her friends about how she'd built her empire from the ground up. She had no idea I was dismantling it behind the scenes. The hardest part was keeping up appearances at home. Every time I looked at her, I felt the anger bubbling up, threatening to explode. But I had to stay calm, stay focused. If I confronted her too soon, it would ruin everything. So, I pretended. "Dinner was great, babe," I said one evening as we sat in the living room. She smiled, sipping her wine. "Thanks. I'm trying out new recipes." You know, keeping things fresh. Fresh. The word felt like a slap in the face. Was that what she called it? Bringing another man into our bed? But I just nodded, forcing a smile. You're doing a great job. When she went to bed that night, I stayed up, scrolling through the financial documents I'd saved on my laptop. I'd always kept meticulous records, every expense, every payment, every investment. It was my nature, being an IT guy. I liked things organized, predictable. And now, that obsession with details was paying off. Jenna had been sloppy. She'd been using our joint account to pay for dinners, hotel rooms, even gifts for her affair partner. At first, I thought it might have been small amounts, things I wouldn't notice. But as I dug deeper, I realized it wasn't just occasional splurges. It was thousands of dollars. She'd been funding her betrayal with my money. That was the final straw. The next morning, I called Mike for an update. Got some good stuff for you, he said. Your wife's been busy. He sent me a folder full of photos, screenshots, and reports. There she was, arm in arm with some guy I didn't recognize. They were laughing, holding hands, kissing in broad daylight like they didn't have a care in the world. I flipped through the photos, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. There were text messages too, long, flirty exchanges where they joked about how clueless I was, how easy it was to lie to me. She thinks you're an idiot, Mike said bluntly. No offense. None taken, I replied, my voice cold. What about the guy? Who is he? Mike hesitated. That's the interesting part. His name's Ryan. He's married too. That caught me off guard. Are you sure? Positive. Wife's name is Claire. They've got 2 kids, a house in the suburbs, the whole 9 yards. A twisted part of me almost laughed. Jenna had been sneaking around with a guy who was just as much of a liar as she was. It was poetic, in a way. But it also gave me an idea. Can you find Claire's contact information? I asked. Already did, Mike said. Perfect. I spent the rest of the day putting my plan into motion. First, I called our bank and froze all our joint accounts. Jenna wouldn't notice right away, she rarely checked our finances, assuming I'd handle everything. But when her credit card got declined, she'd know something was up. Next, I reached out to my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rachel. I explained everything, Jenna's affair, the financial mismanagement, the evidence Mike had gathered. Rachel didn't mince words. You've got a strong case, she said. With this kind of proof, you can walk away with the lion's share of the assets. The house, the business, hell, even alimony if you want it. I don't care about the alimony, I said. I just want her to lose everything. Rachel raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Fair enough. Let me draft the paperwork. Finally, I wrote an anonymous letter to Claire, Ryan's wife. I included copies of the photos and text messages, along with a short note. Your husband and my wife have been having an affair. Thought you should know. It was blunt, maybe even cruel, but I didn't care. She deserved the truth, just like I had. That night, I sat across from Jenna at the dinner table, watching her laugh and smile like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She just didn't know it yet. The storm broke 2 days later. Jenna's world was about to come crashing down, but she didn't realize it at first. She was oblivious, still living in her little fantasy. When her card got declined at a boutique, she laughed it off. Oh, it's probably just a glitch, she'd said when she called me from the store. A glitch? I echoed. Huh. That's strange. I'll look into it. She bought her overpriced handbag with another card, completely unaware that it wasn't a glitch, it was me tightening the noose around her perfect little life. The next day, when she walked into the office of her fashion business, she got another shock. 2 of her suppliers had called it quits, citing unforeseen issues with the contracts. By that point, I'd already pulled the strings, renegotiating terms to the point where they decided it wasn't worth their time to deal with her anymore. That afternoon, she called me in a panic. "Alex, something's wrong. The suppliers are dropping me. They're saying the contracts aren't viable anymore. I don't understand what's happening." "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding," I said smoothly. "I'll take a look at the contracts when I have time. Don't worry about it." I could practically hear her pacing on the other end of the line. "I am worried, Alex. This could ruin everything I've built." I smiled to myself. "Everything you've built? What a joke." She didn't realize yet that I'd been the one holding it all together. "Relax, Jenna," I said. "I'll figure it out." But I had no intention of fixing anything. Meanwhile, my lawyer, Rachel, had finalized the divorce papers. They were airtight, designed to ensure I walked away with everything I wanted. The house, the majority of the assets, and the business. Jenna was so arrogant that she'd never bothered to ensure her name was the primary one on any of the legal or financial documents. She probably assumed that as long as I loved her, she'd never have to worry about money. Big mistake. But that wasn't the best part. The best part came when Claire, Ryan's wife, called me. I hadn't expected her to reach out. I figured she'd take the evidence I sent her and quietly deal with it on her own. But Claire was different. She wasn't interested in playing the victim, she wanted answers. "Alex, right?" she said when I picked up the phone. Her voice was sharp, cold. "I got your letter." I stayed silent, unsure of what she wanted. "Ryan admitted everything," she continued. "I confronted him as soon as I saw the photos. He didn't even try to deny it. I guess I should thank you for exposing him." "I just thought you deserved to know," I said. "Well, now I do," she said bitterly. "But I also deserve to know what you're planning to do about it." Her words took me by surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you going to sit back and let them get away with it, or are you going to make them pay?" There was a fire in her voice that I hadn't expected, but I liked it. Claire wasn't just angry, she was ready to act. And as we talked, an idea began to take shape in my mind. By the end of the call, we had a plan. The first part of the plan was simple: make Ryan and Jenna's relationship implode. Claire agreed to confront Ryan publicly, in a way that would leave no doubt about what he'd done. She promised to record everything and send it to me, so I'd have additional leverage. In the meantime, I continued setting the stage for Jenna's downfall. A week later, the moment I'd been waiting for finally arrived. Jenna came home from a business meeting, looking frazzled and angry. She threw her purse onto the kitchen counter and poured herself a glass of wine without even saying hello. "What's wrong?" I asked, feigning concern. "Everything," she snapped. "My suppliers are bailing, my credit cards aren't working, and now Ryan won't even return my calls. He's acting like a coward." I leaned against the counter, watching her unravel. "Ryan, huh? What's going on with him?" She hesitated, her eyes darting toward me like a cornered animal. "It's nothing. Just business stuff." "Business stuff?" "Sure." I decided to push her. "You've been distracted lately," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Are you sure there's nothing else going on?" Her eyes narrowed. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I've noticed some changes," I said, choosing my words carefully. "You're out late, you're stressed all the time, and now you're talking about some guy named Ryan. I just want to make sure everything's okay." Jenna's face turned red, and for a moment, I thought she might confess. But instead, she turned the tables. "Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't be so stressed," she snapped. "You're always working, always buried in your laptop. Do you even care about this marriage anymore? The audacity of her words nearly made me laugh. She was still trying to make this my fault, even as her world crumbled around her. I care, I said quietly. That's why I've been trying to hold everything together while you— I paused, letting the sentence hang in the air. While I what? She demanded. I stared at her, my expression blank. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she looked scared. What are you saying? She asked, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Claire. It's done. Video sent to your email. Perfect timing. I think we need to have a conversation, I said, pulling up the video on my phone. About this. I pressed play and handed the phone to Jenna. The video showed Claire confronting Ryan at a restaurant. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, stammering and sweating as Claire laid everything out in front of a packed room. Jenna's name came up more than once, loud enough for everyone to hear. By the time the video ended, Jenna was pale as a sheet. Alex, Don't, I said, cutting her off. Don't you dare try to explain this. I've already heard enough. Her lips trembled, tears welling in her eyes. But I wasn't moved. This wasn't the time for forgiveness. I supported you, I said, my voice rising. I built your business, I gave you everything you ever wanted, and this is how you repay me. Please, just let me explain, she begged. But I wasn't interested in her excuses. Instead, I walked over to the table, picked up a stack of papers, and dropped them in front of her. These are divorce papers, I said. You're going to sign them. Her eyes widened. Alex, no. We can fix this. I'll do anything, just don't do this. It's already done, I said coldly. You don't have a choice. Her tears turned to anger, but she didn't have the upper hand anymore. I'd made sure of that. You'll regret this, she hissed, her voice shaking. No, I said, turning toward the door. You will. And with that, I walked out, leaving her alone to face the mess she'd created. The days after I walked out were a blur. My plan had gone off without a hitch. Jenna's business was in freefall, her relationship with Ryan had imploded, and she'd lost every ounce of the confidence and control she once wielded over me. I should have felt triumphant, but instead, I felt hollow. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. I'd spent months meticulously plotting my revenge, pouring every ounce of energy into taking her down. But as the dust settled, I realized it was something deeper. For 10 years, Jenna had been my everything. Even after her betrayal, even after all the lies, there was a part of me that still cared. A part that missed the woman I thought I'd married. The woman I thought she was. But I buried those feelings deep and reminded myself that this was what she deserved. Or at least, that's what I tried to tell myself. 3 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. Jenna didn't put up a fight, she couldn't. Rachel had ensured I walked away with nearly everything, the house, the bulk of our savings, and full control of her failing business. Jenna was left with nothing but a few personal belongings and a battered reputation. I didn't hear from her after that. No texts, no calls, nothing. At first, I was relieved. I didn't want to hear her excuses or see her tears. But as the silence stretched on, it started to gnaw at me. I told myself she was just licking her wounds, that she'd eventually pick herself up and move on. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. 2 months after the divorce, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, signing the final paperwork to transfer Jenna's business into my name. It was supposed to be a victory, the last step in reclaiming my life. But as I walked out of Rachel's office, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to check on Jenna. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was just curiosity. Either way, I found myself driving to the tiny apartment she'd rented after the divorce. When I knocked on the door, there was no answer. The lights were off, and the curtains were drawn. I knocked again, louder this time, but still nothing. "Jenna?" I called out. My voice echoed down the empty hallway. A sinking feeling settled in my chest. I tried the doorknob, and to my surprise, it turned easily. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, cluttered living room. "Jenna?" I called again, stepping inside. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of unwashed dishes and something else I couldn't quite place. My stomach churned as I made my way through the apartment, my footsteps echoing in the silence. That's when I saw it. Jenna was sitting on the floor in the corner of the bedroom, her back against the wall. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled, and her face pale. Empty pill bottles surrounded her, scattered like fallen soldiers. My heart stopped. "Jenna!" I shouted, rushing to her side. I shook her gently, my hands trembling. "Jenna, wake up!" Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. She let out a weak, raspy breath, her lips barely moving. "Alex," she whispered. Her voice was so faint, I had to lean in to hear her. "I'm sorry." "No, no, no," I said, panic rising in my chest. "Don't do this. Don't you dare leave me like this." Her hand reached for mine, her grip weak and trembling. "I couldn't do it," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I couldn't live without you." My throat tightened as her words sank in. This wasn't what I wanted. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. "Jenna, stay with me," I pleaded, pulling out my phone to call 911. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely dial. The operator answered, and I shouted the address into the phone, begging them to hurry. "Stay with me, Jenna," I said again, clutching her hand. "Help is on the way." Her lips curved into a faint, bitter smile. "You won," she murmured, her voice fading. "You got everything." And then her hand went limp. "Jenna. No, no, no. Stay with me." I shook her, my voice breaking. The paramedics arrived minutes later, but it was too late. I sat on the floor, staring at her lifeless body as the medics worked in vain to revive her. The hollow feeling I'd been carrying for weeks erupted into something I couldn't contain. Guilt, grief, anger, everything I'd bottled up came crashing down, suffocating me. I thought I wanted revenge. I thought I wanted her to suffer the way I'd suffered. But as I sat there, watching the woman I once loved being wheeled out of the apartment in a black body bag, I realized I'd destroyed more than just her life. I'd destroyed myself. Jenna's death made the news the next day. The headline read, "Promising fashion designer found dead in apparent suicide." The article was brief, mentioning her struggles after her business collapsed and her divorce. It painted her as a tragic figure, a woman undone by circumstances beyond her control. No one knew the truth. No one knew that I'd been the one pulling the strings, orchestrating her downfall. And now, I had to live with it. I sold the house, donated the money, and disappeared. I couldn't bear to stay in the city, surrounded by memories of what I'd done. Some nights, I lie awake, replaying everything in my mind. I see her face, hear her voice, feel the weight of her hand in mine as she whispered her final words. "You won." But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a loss so profound, I knew I'd carry it with me for the rest of my life. They say revenge is sweet, but they're wrong. Revenge is bitter, and in the end, it destroys everyone it touches. Including the one who seeks it.